The Bay Area club scene was now internationally recognized. Musicians started to come from all over the world, knowing that San Francisco was a hotbed for up-and-coming thrash bands. On the other hand, Los Angeles grew its reputation for its multitude of glam bands, creating a rift between the two regions, encouraging Southern California bands like Megadeth, Slayer, and Dark Angel to travel north, calling the Bay Area their second home.
You can't talk about San Francisco without talking about that there certainly is a history up here of individuality, of people trying to figure it out for themselves, of a different kind of openness to different political elements, cultural elements, sexuality, and so on and so forth. There's a different thing in the water up here, where LA, Hollywood, it's entertainment, it's flash in the pan, it's a business. Up here it's just a different thing.
LA seemed much more vast, whereas in the Bay Area, the congregation was in a smaller area. LA to me seemed very larger. I became friends with some of the guys in Armored Saint and all that, and gravitated towards some of those people, and a couple of guys from Agent Steel, and things like that. But it definitely didn't have that sort of warm sort of vibe that the musicians shared in the Bay Area, I thought, to me. I thought the industry was there, and so there could be a chance of maybe breaking through and having the right person see you. But I was willing to take my chances and just stay here in the Bay Area.
And so I meet Dave, and one of the first things after we, were putting the band together, one of the first things he says is, we're not playing any clubs in LA. Right. I hate the clubs here, they suck, we're going to San Francisco, it's a whole different scene, and obviously he had just been living there with Metallica. So he was hip to the whole movement up here, and I say up here because we're in San Jose tonight.
And believe me, we were, excited to get out of LA because of, the glam movement that was happening during that period. I remember playing on stage and seeing the fans jumping on stage and then jumping off. Right. Bodies were just flying everywhere. It's like, wow, this is amazing, I felt very much at home. I felt welcomed.
We loved staying in the Bay Area because the LA scene was so crowded with musicians, and everybody was getting to know each other, and everybody was starting to get almost too associated with each other, and they all started sounding similar to each other because they were hanging out at each other's rehearsal sessions.
The record companies would sign people out of fear in LA, you know what I mean? They'd see all the other record companies and go, God, I don't want to miss out on this, And San Francisco would always take longer to get a deal. But most of the fans that we had all came from the suburbs. So it was actually a really great testing ground, because it's like we basically, after we got signed, did our same show that we did at the Stone, and it worked everywhere in the world, because it was the same people that would go to big concerts would come see us, and then we'd know what songs were working the best, and we knew if you could sell that place out, you had something going. But it took longer. And we did have some record companies, major record companies, say, hey, here's the deal we're going to give you guys. We give you a development deal. We'll rent you guys a house. We want you to come to LA for 3 months and play every place in LA. And we just said no. And in retrospect, we probably would have been better off to move to LA. We might have got a different deal, sooner, because we didn't know time was running out too, but it's like, we kind of felt loyal to all the people that had supported us too, because we'd sold out so many shows.
Dave had that totally pegged right, because in LA everything was pay to play. You'd have to go out and hang up handbills, you'd have to sell tickets, and Dave's like, I'm not doing any of that, And to Dave's credit, he always held himself as a star, and he was, and he is, and that really kind of raised the bar to everybody in Megadeth.
We played like one of our first shows up there in the Bay Area at Ruthie's Inn. And it was funny because I met Gary Holt from Exodus, and we had been listening to the Bonded by Blood, like it was on, in the tape trader scene beforehand, And we were listening to that on the way up and all that. And, honestly, for me in the Bay Area, I didn't get into it that much personally, because I lived over in Huntington Beach and whatever. So the Bay Area stuff didn't really affect me personally.
And it really just came down to some opportunity and looking at the Bay Area as something, as also a special place equal to LA. It was kind of a roll of the dice, but I'll tell you what, I really feel like it was the right move.
I'm assuming the thrash scene out of Northern California probably came in complete contrast to what was happening in Los Angeles.
I don't know if we ever felt even opening for Saxon that we belonged. You know, we definitely had a bit of a kind of an identity issue at the time with just not belonging anywhere. You know, we were just outcasts, you know, and that was why when we finally came to San Francisco in that fall, that was the first time we felt like we belonged anywhere.
There was more like a sort of like brother metal, like a brotherhood of metal, you know. Everybody was kind of like a little more tolerant and just very open, whereas LA was a little more like Hollywood.
My perspective of the LA thrash scene is that anybody in LA who was into thrash came up to my house.
Right.
Not my house, but you know what I mean? Came up to San Francisco.
I think in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, the difference is people just wanted to like be in a band first, you know? I want to be in a band and jam and then play someplace. You know what I mean? And it wasn't like, you know, we didn't see rock stars like every second walking by or something. Maybe somebody go, hey, there's Carlos Santana, or maybe, you know, Pablo Cruz or something. You know, there wasn't like, but in LA, the bands were like, we can't wait to go to a gig in a limo. You know what I mean? It was like so much more over the top. Not that their bands were bad, but there were so many bands like that. And that didn't happen as much here. People really practiced more, and I think just wanted to be good.
But Armored Saint was lucky enough to go and play in the Bay Area and have some great shows and play with Metallica on a few occasions. And you know, we did our own shows at the Stone and the Keystone and Berkeley and Palo Alto, and there was a great gig, Ruthie's Inn, and with Laaz Rockit, you know. So I mean, San Francisco had its own scene as well. That was kind of happening, and LA was happening, and it was a good time to be in California.
You know, I always thought the Bay Area had really cool bands that would push boundaries and be original, whereas LA, it's like once one band got big, all these bands tried to sound like that one band, and then this other band would also get big, all these other bands would try to sound like that band.
We were proud to be from San Francisco, though. You know, because we were from small town kids, really. So we were suburban kids that moved to the city. That was the big city to us. Like, now we're going to live in the Haight-Ashbury where music exploded like in the late 60s, and this has and now it's like the 80s, and we're going to be part of this whole resurgence of stuff. So we were kind of proud of that, and the way the community would help bands, and even the strip clubs, you know, like, oh, you're a San Francisco band, like the O'Farrell Theater, which was the best place. They'd let us in free, and we'd hang out, and strippers would like support us.
You know, me and my buddies would drive up to the Bay Area all the time and see shows, you know, and just pack them into my truck, and we'd sleep in the back of my truck, you know, in a Safeway parking lot.
We played in LA, and it was actually pretty good. And LA isn't anywhere near as bad as everybody says it is. It's actually pretty reasonable. It's just there's a lot of fake people and posers down there too. So a lot more there than up here. But I don't know. Nowadays it's all weird because now we have all the horrible hipsters and they suck.
Up in the Bay Area, we can go up and play with Exodus or Laaz Rockit, or, you know, there could be a 3-band bill of like-minded metal, and that's where I think the Bay Area folks were just a lot more open-minded. You know, we had our stores down here, but, you know, they had the Record Vault, they had, what was the place in Walnut Creek? Record Exchange, Walnut Creek there.
Megadeth, one of the big four. If you look at their history, the first like at least 5 or 6, maybe more shows were all in Northern California.
Kerry's name came up, and he was really into it. You know, he always said he saw Dave play with Metallica opening for Saxon at the Whiskey a year or two earlier, and how it changed his life. So Kerry was definitely a fan of that era of Dave's participations with Megadeth and his guitar playing. So it was great. And man, Kerry came in, and he really just fundamentally understood how Dave played.
When we went to Frisco the first time, we didn't know how we were going to eat. We went up there, which we stockpiled food before we went just in case, and it was great because the first night we made a bunch of money and we were good to go.
I was 16. I was on the road with Slayer, and we played Ruthie's with Exodus headline, and then there was Vermin from LA, and they were the opening act, and then Possessed. You know, it was my first time seeing Possessed as well, so I was stoked on all of that. That was great. And I just remember there was, LA was just, you know, everybody knows, full of lameness, and Slayer was the heaviest thing we had, and Dark Angel was also down there. I wasn't in Dark Angel yet, but you had like Abattoir and Vermin and
Agent Steel?
Pre-Agent Steel, yes. And we would come up here to see the shows. We'd come up here to see, Megadeth and Slayer and see Possessed shows.
It's funny because when we came up here, I remember the first trip we did a record store, an in-store signing. I think it was at the Record Vault in San Francisco. Right. And all these fans were coming up going, dude, Kerry, what's going on with Slayer? What's going on with Slayer? And all of a sudden, I think you realize, wow, we've reached farther than LA. Maybe it's first time out of LA. Right. And so you could see the wheels going, maybe I shouldn't jump ship yet,
In the early 80s, glam metal was in full swing down in Los Angeles. Taking a cue from Motley Crue and Rat, the Bay Area also created its own subgenre of the Sunset Strip-inspired sound and image, with bands like Violation, Hans Naughty, Head On, and Roadrunner. This flashy style ultimately clashed with the aggressive nature of the thrashier bands.
Everybody keeps talking about the Bay Area as the root of the thrash metal scene, and Bay Area was so much more than that. I mean, you really think about some of the bands that really grew out of that. It wasn't necessarily all thrash.
Well, there was a lot of glam bands. I mean, don't think that there wasn't. It's just we kind of interbreeded with them.
By San Francisco metal standards, my friend, if you came to an Exodus show or a Metallica show with a Motley Crue, Wasp, Bon Jovi shirt on, oh man, I felt sorry for them. I really did. I would see these guys and I say, oh man, they have no idea. And I didn't like to see that because it's like, I like Wasp. I like Motley Crue, you know what I mean? Because I like anything. Good music is good music, but I understand what was happening up here. They were rebelling against that.
DRI did a show at the Farm with Discharge headline. Discharge from the UK, and Discharge used to be a total hardcore punk band, but they switched over to a glam metal band, and they played this infamous show with DRI, Attitude Adjustment, and Possessed. And it was a killer show. DRI particularly really killed it. And then Discharge come out there looking all like a Hollywood Sunstrip strip Poison type of thing. And the crowd just absolutely hated them. They're chanting, fuck you, and throwing everything at them. A trash can got thrown at them. They get spit and bombarded, and they had to leave the stage. And it was really, really ugly.
Those bands did not want to be considered like LA. They didn't want to be hair bands. They despised makeup bands and teased hair and all that. So they went out of their way to not be that. And by not being that, you had to be heavier, you had to be more aggressive. You couldn't be singing about banging a chick in the back of your car.
Slayer, Toby Rage told me that Slayer said San Francisco convinced them they didn't need to wear makeup. Because in the early days, you see early pictures, they were wearing it. San Francisco say you don't need that shit. And I understand why. Hey man, they trying to make it, in LA. But LA was glam. That was like New York Dolls type look. That was glam rock. It was not metal.
The first album, Slayer had makeup on. We were trying to fit the LA.
We played with you guys.
Yes.
You guys were, I think, came up and your first show was with us, I believe.
Yes. We had the makeup on there still.
Yeah.
We got such a bad reception by the San Francisco fans. Yeah. Slayer canned the makeup.
You remember Andy Airborne Anderson?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody knows him. Of course. He was the one that would catch the most flight, when he'd jump off the PA cabinets into the crowd. I remember seeing pictures of him just hovering over the crowd just like that.
Yeah.
Well, he
Toby
said,
Wright.
and Toby,
Wright,
rest in peace, dude. Andy came up to us and said, hey guys, it sounded really good, but it would have sounded a little better if you guys didn't wear the makeup. And from that moment on, we said, fuck it, no makeup. Wow. But we only did it because it was the evil thing to do,
Yeah. The makeup thing, we needed something like that. Again, for LA, we were doing everything we could to stand out above the rest. And it was just simple, the little eyeliner stuff, but it made him, you wanted to look like a rock star on stage. You had to in LA. And when we got to Frisco, it was a totally different scene. They embraced us, they loved us, they took us in as their own, and they did. They started commenting about the makeup, and it was not even a second thought to get rid of it. It didn't mean anything. We had this new home now. We were being accepted. people liked us, so we didn't need that anymore.
There was nothing like that going on down in LA. So, you know, I could just see where that really carried, you know, went home and just kind of like wiped the makeup off. Gary's kind of like, I've seen the Holy Grail. It's in the Bay Area.
Right.
And so he went home, and, you know, and it's cool because quite honestly what it did is it now brought forth Slayer to be who they are today.
There were some bands up here that were more LA. You know, was a very cool guy named Dave Vane. You know, there's Vane and, you know, Hans Naughty and like you guys sang. So obviously it was just a mixed bag.
So even though our image was kind of more what you would consider glam or whatever, the music wasn't really glam. It was like, you know, all my favorite bands were like Coliseum 70s rock bands, you know? So even though I liked Hanoi Rocks and stuff like that, I didn't want to be in a band like that, or even New York Dolls. I didn't want to play that kind of music. I wanted to play like hard rock, but just have a different image.
Vane, of course. You got Jet Boy, you know, which we were good friends with. And it's like that little clique. You got like kind of the Sea Hags, Mickey Shields, and I guess Le Mans was kind of... Yeah, they were kind of glammy, you know? But the glam bands always had some like sick lead guitar players. You know, they're like kind of like in the vein of Rat and like that kind of vibe. So I like the guitar playing. It was just, you know, there was a little bit of that was a little light for us back then. And you know, if you ask Paul Bailoff about that, he'll tell you the same.
Vane, obviously, Jet Boy, you know, Hans Naughty,
Harry Carey. I met Bailoff at a Harry Carey Hans Naughty concert for the very first time.
All of a sudden, other thrash bands started going, hey man, you know, you want to come down to the studio and stuff? And the same guys that were a little like, you know, really like, oh, this guy's like really over the top, because we were getting more and more over the top. We went the crazy hair and tons of makeup and like half naked running around stage, but we'd be smashing guitars and playing really hard rock. Right. And to this day, I just played with Exodus last summer and this big festival in Germany, and even they were always say like, yeah, you know, even though that kind of music wasn't exactly our bag, we'd always come to your show to get laid because there's so many chicks.
Back in that point in time, we were into thrash and we were like street level fucking metal, so even though we were good friends with Vane and we were managed by the same person, deep down inside, you know, they were posers and we were thrashers, so you had that thing going on. So I mean, but I think they were a quality band. They had good songs, they had good structure, they knew what they were doing. It just wasn't our thing at that point in time.
Another really great show that I saw was a band called Road Crew, which most people probably don't remember. You know, they were only around for like 30 seconds or whatever. It was Davey Vane from the band Vane, who is also from there, and Steven Adler right after he got tossed out of Guns N' Roses. And they came out and they were playing, I don't know what they were playing. I didn't know the songs and I knew Vane pretty well. They obviously knew Guns N' Roses. So they were playing, I guess, new stuff. And it sounded really, really good. And I was like, I saw it the one time, I was like, fuck yeah, this is gonna be solid, you know? I can't wait till this comes out. And then it never did. It just sort of fizzled away.
Like Mad Anthony, for example. I mean, they were one of the only local bands that would sell out the Omni. You know, and they didn't have a major record out. They were putting out bands like Kid Blue, you know, Flame, who I'd mentioned before. Sleaze was an old band that was around back then. There was also the big wave of like bands out of San Francisco that kind of sounded like the London Choir Boys, that kind of like swaggery Rolling Stones thing. But it was ironically, those shows also did as well out here, because even though it was more of a heavy bass community in Oakland especially, you know, you could still do a hair metal band, you could still do a Y&T or one of those kind of bands and still sell it out because that audience was here as well. The friendship went beyond the genres of the music, but somehow, in another case, the genres of the music made a difference.
Sea Hags, that album was great. I used to go see them every time they played when I first moved out here. When I first moved out here, I was kind of a loner, and I would go to shows by myself. That band was great. It should have been huge, I thought. There was a band that nobody knows about called Osgood Slaughter that was, to me, they were one of the best bands I ever saw.
I mean, I was into Tigers of Pantang, Venom, Merciful Fate, and I loved the Crew. I mean, you know, that was kind of like a no-no not to like that kind of band being in my genres, like, you know, Kill Posers, but Motley Crue kind of got away with it. You know, everybody liked Motley Crue. I think because all the girls liked them.
The thrash versus glam debate, I think it was more between the fans as opposed to the artists. I think to the musicians, it was all rock and roll to them, but the fans, there was a real division about whether you were really metal or if you really weren't, you know.
Mind you, we were young. We were young, teenagers in high school, and we were dealing with our life as a young teenager and expressing it openly with no PC, involved. Right. But, back then it was a different trip.
When we started headlining shows and selling them out, then we got more and more popular. But the whole thrash and rock thing started kind of getting a little bit of a separation because the thrash people, didn't wear any makeup at all, and it was all like kind of a macho thing. And so then if you kind of were a makeup wearing dude, you were like a poser. Right. And we all lived in the Haight-Ashbury. So the people that lived in the Haight-Ashbury at the time were like alternative people that looked way more freaky than rock people. So we tried to get people around there to go to our shows, and it made us look even kind of more freaky because that was a different look than like Doc and Lab or something. Right. It was like, and we kind of incorporated a little of that image, just living on the streets, and surviving by people giving us. The Sea Hags lived there too. I mean, if there wasn't this one bartender that at the night break, Karen Reynolds, we all would have died and starved. She'd give us free drinks and food for behind the bar. I mean, she kept like at least 3 or 4 bands alive,
Le Mans.
Yeah.
Remember Le Mans? Yeah, Pete Marino. Yeah, you remember? Yeah.
As soon as they saw that I could write that kind of Journey-esque kind of stuff, they were all, do that. They had the publishing guys call me, do that. They were very aggressive, and that's okay because I was going with it. I didn't care. I was 24. I was just trying to get chicks, okay? And it worked.
I remember Exodus headline, and they had Toby Rage and Andy Airborne working for him, Andy Anderson.
Slay Team.
Yeah, the Slay Team working for him.
Toby Rage was the one that was in the big dives off the...
Lonnie Unel, too.
Yeah, that's right.
Lonnie was Rick's brother, yeah.
And he would also, head walk on people, crowd walk on top of people's heads, and he was doing that. And they had cattle prods. They had big ass, cattle prods to prod people with. I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever thought of. This is awesome.
Thank goodness they took a liking. I was always so scared of them.
You're all right, kid.
We never hung it. I didn't at the Metallica house, but there was another house kind of somewhere right in town that everybody seemed to go hang out with, and that was always the after show party house. Right. And it was just a cool scene, the dreaded drive back to Los Angeles after the show.
Back then, it was like we were all together as one. It's like the gig, party in the parking lot, play the show. Where's the party? We'd go to the party, and it was like that every weekend.
Parties would be either at wherever Paul Bailoff was living. He moved around a lot, and they always ended up at Paul's house. Or Alexis Olsen of Legacy would throw some amazing parties in Testament, and they always ended up in East Bay. And we'd always have these drunken, scary rides back to the city. Ran out of gas on Treasure Island, had to siphon gas from a military vehicle 4 in the morning. That was pretty scary, sketchy, but typical. Everything was in East Bay, and all the biggest parties, the craziest parties, because all the LA people would come up, and Suicidals and Slayers, and you'd have to have huge parties for those guys.
Slayer and Exodus played at Ruthie's Inn, and they stayed at this little hotel on University Avenue in the middle of Berkeley, and Brian Slagle had a room down the hall where he was sleeping while we were all in the Slayer room that had pizza nailed to the ceiling and a TV covered with shaving cream, and by the time I headed out the door, people were taking a hole through to the next room over.
The hotel room it looked like firewood kindling. There's the dressers,
furniture destroyed.
There was nothing.
Go there and laugh our asses off because these guys are so fucking crazy. And I'll never forget those days. We were at a party out here in Sacramento, and this fucking bitch passed out drunk with her mouth open. Paul Bailoff pulls a dead mouse off a mouse trap and drops it right in her mouth.
various homes or warehouses where they were practicing, or at the El Cerrito Metallica mansion, Mark Whitaker's poor house, which, man, the dirt out there, it needs to, it's toxic.
This guy from Shannon shows up at a thrash metal show, and there was, oddly enough, every now and then there'd be a few girls there, and I knew the girls there, and this guy approached me and said, hey man, you want to party at the Fairmont? And you know, I'm in a band too. I go, what band are you? He's like, I'm in Shannon. And I was like, no shit. I go, hell yes, let's go. And I grouped together about 5 girls and a couple dudes, and I said, these dudes from fucking Shannon, dude. It's like, we do this kind of shit every night. When are we gonna have this opportunity again? And so we went to the Fairmont, and at least a day and a half passed. And you know, once he was out of blow and the girls were all disappearing and everything was going, he was almost grabbing me like, you can't leave too. And I was like, dude, Shannon, you're out of blow, dude. And it's like, I gotta get back across the bay. I got things to do.
It was reckless time. There was DEA agents hanging out with the bands in San Francisco. They didn't know this, but some of them were tour managers of other bands like the Starship. Starship had a DEA guy managing their whole tours.
One time in Detroit, we were playing, and I don't know why they wanted to stop the show. They called the cops, and the cops came on stage, and we're playing our last song, and it was like Kill Is One, you know, just all and I was watching this all, and like I think they arrested our tour manager because he was trying to start a pit. And then the cops were like walking on stage, and they had their weapons drawn and stuff, and we're just like all, I was like, fuck, I'm just not gonna stop. I'll just put my head down and keep headbanging. And then once he like came right here and he was like pushing me, then I just stopped and took off stage. And then they were like, oh, our tour manager got arrested for trying to incite a riot and all this BS.
The most drastic impact on the Bay Area metal scene was the arrival of a fledgling young band called Metallica. When they first played the Stone during the Metal Massacre night, sponsored by Metal Blade Records. This night was a total game changer.
So I had this jacket that my friend Bill Burkhardt from the Walnut Creek Record Exchange, which was just an instrumental place for us to go and discover new bands, new heavy metal bands of that era. But he went to England, and as a present he brought me back this green satin Iron Maiden Killers jacket. It was size small, but I didn't care. I put it on, and it fit really tight, but I wore it with pride, and I wore it to the Judas Priest show up in Oakland in 1981. And a few days later, I got a call from this kid down in LA who was saying, "Man, I saw you with this Iron Maiden jacket, tour jacket. Where did you get it? Well, you know, that was just so cool." And it turned out to be Lars Ulrich, you know, who's now, of course, the drummer of Metallica. So we just started to talk, and we hit it off, and it was the start of a new friendship.
Metallica, I helped those guys out when they first came to San Francisco. I had a Volkswagen bus, like I said, and loaded all their stuff in there. We did the Metal Mondays in San Francisco. We did a few shows in the city. I stayed over at El Cerrito at Mark Whitaker's mom's house in my bus. We had a practice shed out in the back that we used to practice in. It was, you know, fucking bologna sandwiches at the grocery store, no money, begging Lars for gas money for the bus. You know, it was that kind of shit.
LA Metal Night in San Francisco, Brian Slagle, Heavy Metal Massacre, or the Metal Massacre, and it was like, somebody canceled. Do you want to go? And we were like, let's go. And then we fucking threw our shit in a truck and drove up, and we played the Stone. And that was really, I mean, without being too dramatic about it, that was what changed everything.
When I saw the Metallica thing, that was a big eye-opener. It was like, wow, we're onto something here. Something's happening, you know? Intangible, you could just feel it. And that obviously led to the Legacies and, you know, the other bands that came in. And also, like, to some extent, that's what led up to the Heathen thing, too. Because the Bay Area was suddenly a super hotbed of real metal.
I think it might have been the first time they came up here, I think. It was in '82, October, I think, something like that. And yeah, I remember seeing them at Soundcheck, and thinking, oh wow, yeah, we're in trouble here, you know. They had fire, and we heard about the band, and certainly had the demo and heard the demo, and they were doing something that was just really just shoot from the hip, just, you know, certainly influenced by the new wave of British heavy metal sound.
I remember a time playing where it was Laaz Rockit in overdrive, and at the last minute, a week before the show, the third band was added, and Metallica was the band. And it said in the ad, Metallica from LA, and we were like, who is this Metallica band who got us bumped down to the opening spot?
So Metallica played the one of their major gigs that everybody knew about, and they sold out the Waldorf or something like that. But then Amble Chorus was playing a Metal Mania benefit or something. It was sort of a word of mouth thing. It wasn't promoted well. The next night at the Mabuhay, and suddenly Metallica was supposed to be on the bill too, but we had been on the scene longer, so we were headlining because we were more known theoretically. And Metallica came out and opened up for our band. It was pretty nuts, and they kept playing too long. Dave Mustaine was all drunk, and they kept playing over, and we actually had to have the power turned off on them, which is pretty fucking hilarious.
But yeah, at the time, I remember the show, watching Metallica, sitting back, thinking, what is this? What's going on here? Is this metal or is this punk? You know? And a good half the crowd was up front just totally enthralled and taken over by it. The other half was sitting back like going, whoa, what is this? You know? Should we be behind this or is this the enemy? You know, we didn't know. But obviously in retrospect, you know, the people spoke.
Before Kirk was in the band, he used to be in Exodus.
Yeah.
And I remember that, I guess Kirk, what's his name?
Dave Mustaine.
Dave Mustaine was playing with them. So Kirk was just, he used to be our roadie for Anvil Chorus, and I remember he would help carry my keyboards.
The Blizzard of Oz and Motorhead tour, the first one, we were following Motorhead around, Greg and I from the Record Vault. We caught him down in Reseda at the Country Club. Right. And that's when I met Lars. He got off the bus with Lemmy and a kid named Banger Birch that used to hang out at the Record Vault.
Kirk was in Exodus then. And Dave was, of course, Dave Mustaine was Metallica. And in those days, man, it was, Dave was the man, from what I saw.
It was just like, oh my God, there are people here like us. There are people here that look like us, that think like us, that smell like us, that fucking feel like us. Do you know what I mean? And then it was just like, we belong here.
It was just a whole different world. It seemed like, you know, we would go to those shows and not understand what was going on. Like, why do people, I mean, personally, it seemed like there was no girls in their audience at all. It was, you go to a show, it's a bunch of dudes in leather jackets. It's like, who wants to do this?
I didn't understand that whole thing when Metallica first started out. Every time I went to their shows, it was all dudes with like spiked collars, sweating like I am right now. You know what I mean? Like, oh, these crazy dudes. And it was like, no chicks. There was no chicks. And finally, at one point, Lars came to me and he said, you know, Peter, he goes, I hate your band. I think you guys suck like Journey, right? But you do get a lot of chicks. You know, maybe we're gonna play the Stone now. You know, maybe we'll play with you guys at the Stone.
Lars said he was getting a band going. It was Metallica. They were gonna come to the Bay Area. He used to send me flyers. I would hang them up in the city. They'd come and do the Metal Mondays. About the second, they had Ron McGovney playing bass. The second time they came over, they had gotten Cliff from Trauma. And it was Dave Mustaine, James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Cliff Burton. I had my bus, I loaded their shit for them. They stayed in a record store a couple of nights. Then we went over to Whitaker's house, stayed at his house.
The rest of that year, we played 3 or 4 more shows in San Francisco. You know, Cliff Burton showed up on our radar.
Cliff Burton, man after my own heart. He wore the bell bottoms. Mm-hmm. See, now the bell bottoms to me, I wear them to make a statement because I grew up in the 60s. I remember that time. I come from that era, and when I would look at my records, when I turned the records album over, that's what the people were wearing. And that never got old for me. And Cliff, you see him wearing them.
Obviously, I became friends with Cliff Burton early on when he was in Trauma. I've heard other musicians mention that they were just blown away by his stage presence and the way that he just, not just the way he dressed and behaved, but also the way he played and approached music. So we became good friends, and actually it was me that ultimately contacted Cliff to let him know that there was interest from Metallica and him joining the band. And Lars was too shy at the time to actually call Cliff himself, so I kind of arranged the first meeting for them. And as you can see, that developed into a tremendous success for all parties involved.
Cliff Burton came from was another world, the kind of the Castro Valley, Hayward, for all intents and purposes, and I'm dramatizing here a little bit for effect, but they were rednecks. They didn't give a fuck about anything, the way they looked, the way they dressed, so there was a whole kind of, even like what was going on out there compared to what was going on in the city, in San Francisco, as people call the city. That was a whole nother world. So the Jim Martins and the Mike Bordens and the Cliff Burtons and that whole thing then again also brought a kind of a different energy and outlook into, because when I met Cliff Burton, he had no idea who Diamond Head were. He didn't know fucking Angel Witch. He was listening to ZZ Top and Leonard Skinner. You know what I mean? So it was a lot of different shit coming from a lot of different places that all just blew up and kind of happened at the same time.
I appreciated that, man, though, to see this guy. It was obvious when he said he liked what we were doing and he saw the show. He was really open-minded guy, and he was laid back, man. It would be hard to not like him.
All the Bay Area music was really, really killer, and we could understand why Metallica moved up here, because, I'm not saying they were laughed out of LA, but their kind of music was not
accepted.
Yeah, and they also, in the early days, they weren't what they are now.
Obviously, Metallica, when they moved there and said, they moved to the Bay Area and they said, we're a Bay Area band. They sort of they put the flag on the moon, like saying, you know what, we're from here and we're going to be part of this community and this music scene. Clearly that established a lot.
Metallica were more, I don't even call them, almost like street metal or something. Like I was into more technical musicians and stuff like that, and they were more just kind of almost like a punk attitude to metal or something like that. They weren't like guys that spent forever practicing and stuff. They just, they were just going for it. And it was fun, really, really nice guys though, always. Cliff Burton was great. I ended up re-releasing a Trauma record with him on 4 bonus tracks at some point.
In those 4 months of them moving to El Cerrito and being in the Bay Area, metal was just getting just insane in early '83. It was just the kids, everybody was talking about Metallica coming up, and they're all waiting for Metallica to play. And of course, Exodus was playing nonstop and getting huge. So actually it was between those two guys at that time. And of course, Metallica just played those 2 shows at the Stone in March of '83 and just blew everyone away.
The 2 shows that Dave Mustaine did with Cliff were just monsters. Those 2 shows in '83, I think it was March '83, it was just totally insane.
I remember they told me that they wanted, their idea was to get John Bush and then get Cliff, and that's what they wanted to do.
And I said I would have bet everything I owned when people said Metallica would be the #1 band in the world. I said, I spent some time with those guys. They were pretty rough and tumble, and I just didn't think they were all that manageable. James was like, they were kids. Yeah. Kids with beer.
One morning, I get up, come in the kitchen for some coffee, and Lars is talking to somebody on the phone. He gets off the phone, he goes, I talked to Johnny Z back in Megaforce in New York. He wants us to come out and do an album. And I'm like, oh, that's the Anthrax label, that's cool. So Lars is like, you want to go? And I'm like, dude, I don't know. I go, you really think that this kind of stuff is going to take off? Yeah. And he goes, yeah, dude, it's got to. This is my life. And I go, I don't know, Lars. I mean, because I was older than these guys. Sure. I was into the old psych and into the heavy 70s shit, and this stuff was cool. The new wave of British heavy metal bands reminded me of 70s hard rock bands. The 70s hard rock bands never got that big. So I'm thinking, this is like long-haired kids with the screaming, and the metal got faster. It's kind of like punk. Is it going to happen? Is it going to be just a small little thing?
Yeah.
Sure enough, that shit took off. I didn't go to New York, by the way. I stayed And because I had to get a job and get my shit together, and I was hanging out with the kids doing metal.
I thought that Dave was the best part of Metallica, and I was like, we were all waiting. Me, Brian, Lou, everybody was like anticipating Dave coming back and showing Metallica a thing or two, and he did. He really, I mean, he was awesome. Kerry King as guitarist was cool too. And we heard they didn't get along, but I didn't see it. So Dave is an amazing guy. I love talking to Dave. He's always been awesome and nice and crazed and intense, and very intense. You just try not to be around him back then when he was drunk. Just be careful with Dave, because he could be volatile. He didn't start many fights, but I saw him end several. Yeah. I saw him end several. Boom! He was quick.
And you see, he had something, because if he wasn't about nothing, he wouldn't have went away and made something great.
I was older than these guys, right? I got along with Lars and Cliff pretty good. James and Dave, it was a little rough.
Right after Kill 'Em All came out on Megaforce, they came out to the store. And my God, we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bangers, headbangers everywhere. There was more denim and leather in that one square block of Walnut Creek than there has been or ever will be in the future. The cops, nobody knew. We took the city by storm. They were freaked out.
I remember Tony Isabella calling my house and telling me, "You're gonna love this. You guys want to open for Metallica?" And we were like, fuck. Like, I almost threw the fucking phone. I was tripping. And I can never forget it, because on the way to the first night, the fucking van broke down on my way to the show. And I was stuck on the freeway. And luckily my dad, I don't even know how we got a call. I mean, there's no cell phones. I don't even know how I called. And my dad showed up, threw my cabs in the car, and got to the Kabuki. And when we showed up, we threw my stuff on stage, and it was fucked. We were into our set, so we had to play only 3 songs or something on the first night, and we were like, oh.
That's the show I was at.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking, man. But the next night we played our full set. It was 2 nights with Metallica, Armored Satan, Death Angel on the Ride the Lightning tour.
One show I remember in particular was a New Year's Eve of '85, '86. I remember this red T-shirt, and it was at this San Francisco Civic Center. Metallica, Exodus, Metal Church, and Megadeth. Wow. And I just seen something recently online where I think Scott Ian had posted that Anthrax was supposed to be there, but they couldn't, so then they added us. Oh, wow. I guess that's how we got on the bill. But obviously the tensions, obviously Megadeth, Metallica, that whole thing was certainly, Dave had huge supporters up here in the Bay Area, which was smart of him to want to bring Megadeth up here. But now here we are all these years later. I remember Lars saying they had just finished what would become the Master of Puppets record. So they still had the Ride the Lightning backdrop. Right. But it was a great show. I mean, they were on fire. Exodus was just incredible that night.
The most notorious of the Bay Area thrash bands was Exodus, led by the incomparable Paul Bailoff on vocals and guitarist Kirk Hammett, soon to be recruited by Metallica. Exodus quickly became the epitome of what Bay Area thrash was all about.
Tony Isabella, Tony's a woman we knew that worked for Bill Graham Presents, and she was handling a lot of Exodus business at the time, and she was very, very keen on the band, and she was right on target.
You'd go to an Exodus show, and number one, there'd be a line wrapped around the place twice, and once you got in, you didn't know what mayhem was going to happen.
Yeah, Exodus, they're the epiphany of a thrash metal band. I think that, they're amazing. I think that they really represented the Bay Area as far as thrash metal.
Exodus was the premier thrash band out of the Bay Area, and just the speed of their music and just the insanity of their songs, and then Gary's guitar playing and Rick and Gary and just was just so to the wall all the time. And there's nothing like that going on down in LA. So
I remember hearing for the first time hearing Exodus, and I was like, man, this is so heavy. The riffing. Just the riffing, it was so great.
Whether Kurt would have left Exodus or not, those bands were going somewhere anyway. You know what I mean? Exodus was going to still make it. Metallica was going to still make it. They were just, those bands really, they had something special. It was rebellious, man, and there was nothing like it, you know, on the radio. But I understood it.
Speaking for Exodus, like we were just basically doing like backyard parties and stuff, and you know, we were really into. Kirk was into like UFO and like old Scorps. Well, it wasn't old Scorps then; it was kind of current Scorps. And like, you know, he was the first guy I knew who had Tokyo tapes and Strangers in the Night, and you know, we would read Cream magazines at his house and listen to Pat Travers live. And like, our friend from the East Bay named Merle went and bought Iron Maiden's first record, and 3 weeks later we were playing that shit in people's backyards at parties, and they thought it was originals because nobody knew who Iron Maiden was yet.
You know those people that you hate and all talking shit, that they're kind of friends, kind of not? That's just a bunch of bullshit. No mutual friends, no mutual shit. For them I say, no love.
Paul Bailoff. That was a beautiful dude, man. I saw him with Exodus. He was outrageous. Never seen anything like that, man. This, you know, short dude, kind of little chubby guy. He was a firebrand. He fit, you know, because a lot of bands, as good as Exodus was, they could have had a pretty boy up there. You know what I mean? They could have had a nice, pretty looking guy up there. Bailoff was still beautiful for that band.
I remember being at a party. I don't know where we were, but I came there with a couple friends, and Bailoff was there, James Hetfield was there, and there was a pinball machine, and these guys smashed the glass on the pinball machine. And then at one point I was walking around and my friend was like backed up in a corner, and Bailoff had a fork in his chest with like a fork, and he was just like poking him in the chest, and my friend was like, and I kind of had to go up there and go, hey, you know, take it easy, bro. So, you know, Bailoff was, you know, doing his thing.
What we do here is destroy everything. You guys want to rage? It's time to rage!
Paul Bailoff, you know, used to point out to people in the crowd, you know, if you're a poser, you know, and then the crowd would be really tough on that person. And one day I was buying a new car, and we talked about the metal scene and how I was a singer in the metal scene, and he brings up Exodus. And he told me that Paul had pointed him out and called him a poser, and that night, it was like one of his first shows he had ever went to. I guess, you know, the crowd was really tore him up, you know, and but he told me one thing that really caught my mind, you know, made me think, and he said that after the show, Paul Bailoff actually got a hold of him and told him to come backstage, and they treated him pretty well, you know. So as mean as Paul could be, he wasn't mean, but, you know, as Paul could pick out posers, and he was pretty rough on them. He had a good side too, you know, where, you know, he felt bad for that kid, and he brought him backstage and treated him right after that.
You didn't go to an Exodus show with the peroxide hair pumped up like that. You just didn't do it, because he'd single you out and go, "There's any posers out in the crowd right now. I need you to kill him right now." And he'd go, "Kill, kill, kill." And the whole fucking crowd would be going, "Kill, kill, kill, kill." So it was
Even
just
though he'd go home and listen to Rat and Motley Crue on occasion. And Vane.
I met Paul actually before he was in Exodus. I met Paul when I was a freshman in high school, and he had this funky ass Datsun 510. Remember those little, like, it looked like a little, like whatchamacallit, Lego thing put together. And he was one of these guys who like had the pipeline to metal overseas, you know, and he was already out of high school. He was a few years older than me. And he didn't even go to high school with us.
I had known Bailoff since 1979. We'd hung out in Berkeley and stuff, and we were all old friends. And I didn't even know he was in a band till I got back from Europe. And I was so surprised that he was in a band. Bailoff's in a band? He's our little buddy. He's a crazy guy. He was a Motorhead fanatic.
He had this presence, and it was just like, wow, everybody loved him, you know? I mean, he'd walk around with a wolf in clubs, and he was an awesome person.
He's incredible on stage, charismatic singer, and his screams are very unique and original, and this is what made Paul so special.
Paul Bailoff and I were good friends, which was nobody could understand it. You know what I mean? But Paul used to secretly come to me and ask me about the music business. He knew I knew a lot about publishing deals and stuff, so he'd get me in the limousine that Adam Segan owned, and Adam used to pick me up after all the Le Mans shows in the city in his big fancy-ass lemos with Paul Bailoff, right? And it was totally weird because they were totally on speed, and I was totally on coke. So it was a weird relationship, and they drank, and I didn't drink. So Bailoff would be all drunk and be like, tell me about publishing deals, man. I want to cut the heads off publishing guys and put them on poles.
His house was crazy. It was just like, you want to go to a party, you want to see a party where, you know, it's like Animal House, literally. Go to Bailoff's Hell House in Oakland. That was unbelievable.
So there was a period when Bailoff was in Heathen, and after we were running into problems with Dave was having too many problems trying to write lyrics, and so we reached out and got in touch with Paul and just, you know, tried to see if he could like sing on any of the new material. And so when Paul Bailoff was actually he was in Heathen for about 4 or 6 months, somewhere around there, well, not that long, but it was an experiment for us to try to see if back at the beginning if Lee really wanted to get somebody like Paul, and I always thought we should have a real singer guy, which is why we got Dave. But here was the chance that we could actually see if we could get the real deal and see if it would work. But trying to record him was always a pain in the ass. It was very difficult. He just didn't have a good sense of timing and rhythm. And so trying to get good takes out of him was really hard. And so here we are doing this Heathen thing, and I'm trying to record him. We're like down there all night long trying to record, and I remember struggling with that. And we still wound up doing shows with him, and the shows were pretty killer. I mean, him as a frontman is awesome.
It was really the big five, and as the moment Bailoff died, Exodus falls out of the equation, unfortunately.
My roommate was like, that was Ian, of course. Ian was like, what are you doing? Why is Bailoff here? Ian Callan. Yeah, Ian Callan. And he had the name of the house. He was sort of like he was like the main head roommate guy. But this didn't work out really well in the long run because, you know, Paul just, you know, didn't have any way of making any money, and he was just kind of hanging off this living. And
Doug had nowhere to go, so I was just like, okay, fine. You can, you know, if you're in between places, you know, you can set, you know, I've got some couches and stuff down in the workshop in the basement. You can hang out there. The next thing you know, hey, you know, Bello has no place to go. You know, can you stay here too? Like, what? Like, no, but okay, like, so Bailoff moves in, and Bailoff's dog moves in, and so we got Doug, Bailoff, and Level. You know, Level's like Bailoff's wolf dog, living in the basement.
He stole my jacket that I stole from someplace else, but that's another story. But, you know, I mean, there was a photo that showed up later. I think Harold O had a picture of him at some party, and there it is, my jacket, and Paul's wearing it, you know.
My friend Danny from Reality Check TV told me that Exodus lost a bass player and they were looking for a bass player. And Stevie Slater had just broken up because we managed to dig our grave by putting out that album. So I went and auditioned for him, and I managed to get the gig thanks to my good friend Danny.
Flight Illusion and Exodus! Woo! Fuck yeah!
When Metallica left April 1st they also took Exodus's manager, Mark Whitaker, from the house they were staying, and so that week Exodus, Paul, and Gary came up to me and asked me to be their manager. Within a week, first thing they wanted me to do was fire the bass player, Jeff Andrews. So, aside everything, they wanted everything. They wanted money. Give me money. You're our manager. Give us money. So, you guys are. I just started. Within a week, they had lost a bass player, Jeff Andrews, and a guitarist, Kirk Hammett, who flew out that week. So within 2 weeks, I had 3/5 of a band, and they were insane. They were absolutely maniacal. When Bailoff was crazy, Gary was insane, and when they got together, they were dangerous. So I only lasted as manager for like 2 months, if that, and luckily Adam Segan came into the... He's an awesome guy.
We had some joyous times. You have to manage a band like Exodus, you go through a lot of fucking pain.
We signed with the first people that came along and said, hey, we want to sign you to make an album, and we're like, what? Album? Okay, let's do it, you know. And then they treated us great, and we went on some amazing tours. Thanks to Venom for, like, you know, believing in our band and taking us to Europe for the very first time. The Torrid Records passed us on to Combat Records, and Relativity, you know, which was doing bigger things with the music, and you know, it all worked out.
Combat helped us. Combat helped us. They did. They really did, because they had Torrid was in a position where they were like, well, they couldn't do a second record, but they weren't interested in Exodus doing a second record with anyone else either. And Combat said, look, we'll pay you guys here, we'll do what we want, but we want Exodus. And when we went to Combat, we were the #1 band on the label, and they treated us that way too.
Yeah. When they finally got signed, they asked our singer to join the band. And kicking Paul out of the band was just like blasphemy in the Bay Area. I mean, I remember it took a long time for Zet to get the recognition, you know, for being the singer in the band. I mean, I remember going to shows and the whole front row would have their back turned to the band. And it was just like, wow, their fans are making a statement.
Is that Exodus? Is this the motherfucker and the other motherfucker?
Well, Legacy started because I think everybody wanted to emulate what Exodus was doing at the time. You know, we were all very much, I think that goes for any of the Bay Area thrash bands. If you go after for violence or forbidden or, you know, possessed, everybody wanted to be Exodus.
Yesterday and Today were our Van Halen. What a great band Yesterday and Today was. It's still great. Dave's amazing, really, still.
We were so isolated up there in the North Bay because nobody else was playing our style of music. So we just were on to our own thing, and that's it. You know, which was I think was an advantage for us to some degree.
Yesterday and Today, they were up on stage and they were playing, and you know what they were doing? They were having a lot of fun. I could see that. The vibe, they were digging it. They were doing what they wanted to do. It was just like a vibe. They were having fun, and I remember going back, going like, I could do that. I could play music, even if it's just in a small little space. I could play music and have fun like those guys. It just looked appealing.
I also credit the fact that we played a lot of cover tunes when we first started out, before we ever did original material. And in some ways, I think that kind of gave you a general idea about how to put a song together. You know what I mean? Because you have to learn other people's tunes, the way they did it, and it starts making sense after a while. And so all of those experiences, I think, led to making you who you are over the years.
I never heard of YNT until we opened up for them and we had bottles thrown at us. they had a rough fucking crowd that loved them.
Yesterday and Today. They're the greatest band around. They played every weekend or two. They played everywhere. So we'd go see them in Oakland, San Francisco, South Bay, North Bay. We'd see them anywhere because they were always good. And they had good opening bands. They'd get good bands like Violation.
If you look into Y&T's history, everybody opened for them. Van Halen, everybody, Legs Diamond, Metallica, anybody opened for Y&T, even Motley Crue. And then in the adverse, as these bands got big, you know, Motley Crue took them on the road. Everybody took Y&T on the road.
People who weren't even hard rock or heavy metal fans would go see Y&T, and they would brag how many times they've seen Y&T. And a lot of these people, like I said, were not into rock or metal, but going to see Y&T was a thing, and they were that huge and they were that mainstream in Northern California.
The last show we played with them was at Petaluma Civic Auditorium, and we were so stoked because it's a huge place. It was bigger than any club we played. And our singer, Mark Berglund, was up there singing in a bottle because we're like, dude, hits him right in the fucking nose. He goes down. He went down. It was great. Next song. I'll always remember that. That was funny.
Leonard Hayes, another one of the greatest drummers ever, made my spine tingle. I thought I was playing with John Bonham at sometimes, like Bonham was coming through his body and like his drums sounded amazing. He joined Le Mans after Y&T. Oh yeah. For like almost 2 years. And we played the San Francisco club scene with Leonard Hayes on drums.
A band that actually I really loved and became a big fan of was Vicious Rumors. We're not really talked about that much, and we really should be included in the conversation because they were as pioneering as anybody.
Vicious Rumors, which were killer. I mean, Jeff Thorpe, dude, he used to come out of a coffin. They had a coffin on the stage, and there'd be smoke and shit, and there'd be like little guys with fucking candles, and he'd be coming out just ripping on a guitar.
I was always a huge fan of people like Alice Cooper and Kiss, and bands that incorporated a lot of theater in their music, and just and to this day I still love bands that put on, you know, extra shows like that, King Diamond, those kind of things.
Vicious Rumors, good, amazing hard rock, good guitarists, and but they get kind of left behind in history just because they were playing a more conventional type of rock from the early 80s, whereas everything was just getting faster and faster and faster and crossing over and getting more intense, and the vocals.
Look at Vicious Rumors. They were never thrash, right? They were a classic metal band, kind of in line with Armored Saint was doing down in Los Angeles. Vicious Rumors was kind of doing up in San Francisco.
Too, we had a lot of candle operas and these monks, and I remember, you know, our bass player used to come out with a chainsaw, and Jeff Barnacle, our first bass player in Vicious Rumors, and he'd like cut in half this wooden doll of Boy George, and like, you know, it was just crazy stuff we did.
Vicious Rumors, it was the fact that Carl Albert had this incredible voice. I mean, he just was so amazing and such a great frontman. Crying shame what happened with him.
The band had released 2 records. I joined after the first album, replacing Vinnie Moore. But after our deal with Shrapnel, we went 3 years playing shows, and then we got signed to Atlantic in '89. And we did the handshake with the Atlantic rep right after we got off stage opening for Paul Stanley at the Omni in Oakland, which was a great venue.
We never wanted to be pigeonholed into any category. And if you listen to our records, 1 through 12 now, you know, we have 12 studio albums. We just finished our new album, Concussion Protocol. We've ventured into grooves, speed metal, traditional metal, some dark kind of stuff, ballads. We've done a lot of different atmospheric stuff. We've covered a lot of ground.
A couple bands that I remember very clearly from those early days were this band Laaz Rockit, and they weren't really a thrash band. You know, they were more indicative of something that may have been going on maybe down in Los Angeles. You know, and I hate to say hair metal, but they were not a full-on thrash metal band.
Laaz Rockit, before they got signed, they just ruled the Bay Area. I mean, they were like a huge band, and their live show, their pyros, and they had some really good songs, and I don't know what happened. Like, it was their album cover, the artwork wasn't so good, and the production was kind of weird.
That type of music also built strength and it built character. I think that we felt we could take on anybody at any time. As long as I got that stage, I'm going to win them over, and we're going to blow this place up. And I would say 99% of the time it worked.
If you listen to Laaz Rockit, they were definitely a crushing band, but they were slick. And I think that they're probably miscategorized into power metal because they were a little bit slick.
Yeah, they had a crazy manager who made a lot of stuff happen. I remember I was living with Jeff Weller early on in Laaz Rockit, and I remember the day that he came home with some pyro stuff, and the first time he blew off a flash pod in the living room of the house, the whole house, it scorched the ceiling and the whole house filled with smoke.
Working in Walnut Creek at the Record Exchange, there was a little band playing at a pizza parlor in Concord called Death Angel. There's 4 guys, and they were real young. I'm thinking Andy might have been 9, and the other guys were, 13, 14, and then maybe 16, 17.
I stood out in front of the Stone with our demo, with our Heavy Metal Insanity demo. This is pre-Kill As One. And No Time for Love and fucking... Yes, No Time for Love. Intruder, Barren Lands. Yeah. Right? So we had this demo, and I just stood out in front of the Stone until, the Corona dudes showed up. And I'm like, our demo. And sure enough, they called us up. We started playing at the Stone.
Death Angel, they always looked 12 years old. How old are these kids? And they were always amazing, I mean, from Andy's greatest drumming, man, he was the best.
When I'm with Death Angel, Kirk is a Metallica guy now, and Metallica were pretty big. So when the word got out that Kirk was going to help Death Angel with this demo, they're like, oh, Kill Is One, I think it was called.
Make some noise for my dearest fucking friend. And why he produced Death Angel's demo that got us signed. And the reason, is everything just comes together.
And we give new openers. Death Angel was clearly, 10 years younger than us. I mean, I remember when they came to see us with Merciful Fate at the Kabuki, the drummer was like 11.
And I remember someone coming in going, dude, you got to check this band out. The drummer's 11 years old. We were like, really? So we're not, they sounded great. I mean, they were, but just these little, I think he's a little Filipino kid, and they're down there just thrashing away. And I mean, he's literally like 11 years old. You're like, man, this is awesome.
We got mentored a lot by some cool musicians and opened up for a lot of great bands that we loved. And so, again, like to us, it was just normal because we were just running around partying and rocking and having fun. But, we were younger, so sometimes we had to deal with getting snuck in and sneaking around.
Death Angel got their cousin in there, Mark, to sing, so now they were a 5-piece. And they did Metal Blade did a first album called The Ultraviolence. It was fucking killer, like the best album of all that stuff. And they wanted to go do a tour. So a friend of mine named Kat that had a record store up in Santa Rosa called Rebel Records was going to manage them. I didn't want to manage Death Angel because I wanted to be their friend.
So then my manager ended up finding this band, Death Angel. And they were going to go record their first record in Santa Rosa in the studio that we always went to.
We would do Death Angel at the Omni, Death Angel at the One Step Beyond, and Death Angel at the Stone. And every one of those shows would sell out.
So she goes, hey, is there any way, these guys are really young and they're really cool. You want to come meet them and maybe you could help them, a little bit because they don't have that much experience in the studio. So I'm like, okay, cool, so I had to talk with them. I go, hey, I'll come by and stuff like that. And they're like, okay, yeah, no problem, that'd be great, man. So he came by and then, they started kind of doing their thing. And then I go, hey, what does he sing there? And then, it was really crazy because they're like, I'm not really sure, man. I'm just like, we don't really hear what this is a new song. I don't really hear him. I buy my guitars, man. We're blasting. He's a screamer. I just hear him screaming. I'm like, so I kind of work with him a little bit and go, hey, that melody you're doing, I think it's that, So I started doing some stuff and then I go, okay, well, I'll see you guys later. They go, hey, man, come back tomorrow, you could just, do the whole thing and produce it with us. I'm like, oh, okay. So that's kind of how I got into it.
The one that really grabbed me first was Death Angel. I was just, those early Frolic in the Park and Act 3 and, all those records, I was just like, holy shit, this is good.
The way they played together and the energy they had and just, the focus and the attention to detail they'd have. And then it's just like, and then all of a sudden, boom, they were still kids though, you know what I mean? So then it was like, boom, okay, that's over, now we're gonna skateboard, they'd be out skateboarding and shit, and I'm just like, hey man, don't fall or anything, you know what I mean?
Flash forward to today. The metal scene is no more. As in so many cities, gentrification has taken over. The clubs have mostly closed. The record stores are gone. The memories, however, will last forever. The Bay Area scene of the 1980s will never be replicated. It happened at the perfect point in time, in the perfect place. A true once-in-a-lifetime experience.
When I think of those times, we were so lucky, I teach a little guitar nowadays, and the young students, I always say, if you could have seen the San Francisco Bay Area in the 80s, I played with Greg Allman for 10 years, and people that I would meet at Greg's shows would find out that I used to play metal, and they would scratch their heads in disbelief, and I would say, you don't understand, the Bay Area scene, it was all about that.
You had all these little thrash bands that were starting to happen, riding the coattails of all these mainstream bands, Rat and all this stuff that was getting major label contracts. Yeah. So the metal scene was huge in America for a little while. It was top 10.
Right.
So we had stores that was doing metal, there was like concerts were sold out. It was like all the magazines there was tons of shit out with metal, and then it Grunge.
I get asked a lot, did grunge kill thrash? No, not at all. What killed thrash was death metal. Death metal killed thrash.
Yeah.
Because for 8 years, thrash was the most brutal, most edgy, most over-the-top kind of music around, and then it just got uglier, where thrash bands started sounding polite.
Grunge did not kill thrash metal, but in our case, because we were about to sign to RCA Records and we had a huge deal on the table, and then Paul got the offer to do Slayer, and we got Steve Jacobs to play drums.
Badass.
And everything was all go. They're like, we love this, this is great, your demos, blah, 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 blah. And then boom, while we were doing it, Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, and it pivoted. Everything pivoted. So we were on the cusp. We weren't a death metal band, and they weren't interested in any death metal at RCA. They wanted our commercialized, more melodic, Forbidden was kind of in our Queensryche-esque period.
I think the whole club scene was completely changed. I mean, the Broadway scene was kind of really not what it was. This would have been like 1991, so at that point, the Stone was close to being gone. Yeah. The Mabuhay and the On Broadway were pretty much gone. We're not gone, but not active as what it was. And, there was a whole new scene, like it was more like the I-Beam and Nightbreak, and there was a whole new scene of bands. That's when the Seattle, grunge stuff started to pretty much take over everything.
What happens with any great thing, and it became more clear when it happened again to Seattle later, but you have everyone having so much success at first, and all the bands going, I could do that. I could do exactly that. And there was a formula that happened to us Bay Area bands where we all had a certain, kind of circle that we were running in, and then after a while, you knew the label expected a certain thing because it worked for this band. And when Metallica did their first ballad, we all did something. Everyone. But that's kind of where there was just like this succession of we were all doing the same. It was all different music, but it was all kind of the same formula that everyone across the country started doing after we all did it here. So then it all kind of went like a wave where it wasn't as new as like when we first started. It was violent and people were kicking each other's asses and it was all edgy, and then later, because Metallica had so much success, we all just kind of followed on the back end of that, and it's like a whip, and it just after a while wasn't as exciting to the rest of the world. They were looking for something new.
I think I lived in San Francisco during the glory years, because when I left, I moved to LA in 1991 because I joined Red Cross, who's an old LA punk rock band. Right. And that was right when the .com scene, the internet kind of broke out, and it was already getting too expensive for most of my friends to live there anymore. Nowadays, I don't think artists can live in San Francisco anymore. It's so expensive. Even Oakland's getting to be. So I was just glad that I lived there when I did live there, because it's that world is pretty much gone now.
Back then, the Bay Area was probably one of the coolest rock, not just metal, just the coolest music scenes all around. Those were fun times, man. I wish they were here again, but sadly, it never will be again.
You know what I feel really good about is the fact that we played our instruments. Mm-hmm. We met 4 or 5 nights a week in a rehearsal space. We wrote together. We treated it as a job we loved. We lived, ate, and breathed it, in hell or high water. And I look at how music is created today. I don't think, in my personal opinion, without being as offensive as possible, it lacks authenticity to me.
I am really blessed to, be accepted in this music scene, and just have lived through it. And I definitely, no regrets.
That's what's so near and dear about the San Francisco Bay Area thrash scene, is that this was the epicenter, right? And it's like, we're in Silicon Valley where all the great minds come up with, all this wonderful wizardry and gadgetry, and yet here it was also the heart and soul of something so passionate as thrash metal.
The Bay Area scene was just, it was a scene of encouragement. It wasn't a scene of judgment. It was encouragement. It was power.
I am honored. So many fantastic players are influenced by me. It means the world to me.
It was a great training ground. I mean, I got spit on and had stuff thrown at me, but the bands were always really, really cool. But it was pretty intense. Again, that's where I learned how to sing, how to try to draw in an audience. It was obviously a challenge to me. I never minded it, but it was not a pretty sight at all. It was good. It was good.
Sitting down and kind of analyzing it, obviously, if you get some people together, your Brian Lews, your Ron Quintanas, your Ian Callens, your John Stratnanskys, maybe you could kind of intellectualize all of it. But I always get scared if you want to try to intellectualize some of the stuff too much, because I'm not sure that it should be intellectualized. It just fucking was a moment, and it just happened, and it was a bunch of people at the right place at the right time.
Follow your gut, follow your instincts, and that's been a large part of what really has fueled Megadeth over the years. Sure. Again, this decision to come up to San Francisco and all this stuff, was always just real kind of gut instinct stuff, which to me is real rock and roll.
I've always been a champion of all ages venues because you have to get that flow. You want that people to come in and understand that experience and grow from that experience. And it's a lot less available to them now. And I think that kind of hurts the scene a little bit as well.
I don't get really, really excited like everybody else these days. I don't get super excited about music unless it's something that has that Bay Area sound. Havoc, Lazarus AD, Municipal Waste. Those records, they fucking get me cranked again. Like, all right, this stuff might come back.
I think people should go out and see live music a lot more. Not because it makes money for the promoters or the talent buyers, but because it's an art form that's slowly seeming to become extinct, and the live scene needs to be turned around.
We grew up in the metal scene. It was part of our upbringing and our basic teenage years, so everything was great. We used to skate, drink underage, go to shows on Friday night, Saturday night, running back and forth, playing shows nonstop, and it was I just feel fortunate to have experienced that and been in the right place at the right time. And we did what we did, and we just loved everything we did, and we just loved music and loved the scene, as we still do, and it's fucking it, man.
Got Aerosmith all their first record deal and their second one, and he goes, "Who's your favorite singer?" And I go, "Oh, it's got to be Steven Tyler." And he goes, "I'm going to introduce you to him. They're playing tonight, and you got to go backstage." So I go backstage, and I go, "God, this is going to suck," because he probably has everybody in the world come up and say, "Hey, I got in a band because of you," or whatever, So I met him, and he's all pumped up, and he's like, "Yeah, man. Like, Brian tells me you just got a record deal right on, man." I go, "Yeah, I know you probably hear this all the time, bro, but it's like when I got like the Rocks record, I put it on, I go, God, I want to do this. I want to be in a band, and he's like, dude, that is so fucking badass, and now you're fucking signed. We're going to the O'Farrell Theater tonight. We're going to fucking party and all this shit. You just got a record deal. Fuck yeah." And I'm like, oh, this guy's like real. Like, he's like putting this on. He's really excited that I got a record deal, from the guy that got him a record deal. So we end up going to the strip club, and so there's this one room that's a flashlight room there. I don't know, you've been there, right? So you shine flashlights, and these two nurses come, and I'm sitting next to Steven Tyler. I'm trying not to be too much of a fanboy, but he's treating me like, you got a record deal, you're in the club, and all of a sudden, these chicks start taking their clothes off and taking out vibrators, and you're putting them on, and all of a sudden this one chick comes and just straddles us, and Sebastian Bach's there too. And he's sitting there, and I'm going to him, Mike, it's really tripping me out being really this close to Steven Tyler. And he's going, I know, man, it's hard to get used to, but you'll get used to it after a while, And so the chick hands Steven the vibrator. He's just loving it because he's just the total perverted guy, And then he's just like, she's like, you know what to do with this. And I'm just like, when I was a kid listening to Rocks, I never could imagine this ever happening, you know what I mean? And it's almost too close. I almost want an extra seat apart. So then he just looks at me, and he turns on the vibrator, he hands it to me, and just looks at me dead in the eye, and he goes, "You just got a record deal. You do it."
Decided to make the zine I decided to make and not call it Metallica. I wanted to call it Metal Mania because my friend ran off with some name called Metallica.
Like, I remember coming to school, and everybody had goals. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. What's your goal? And it's like, I don't have a fucking goal. I'm just in the moment, listening to my music.
MTV and shows like that, they
Now they launch their own heroes and they tell us what metal is.
I used to call it Exomess. Where are you going tonight? Go see Exomess? You mean Exodus? I'm like, no, Exomess. I mean, they'll have 10 guys standing in front of them on stage, pushing people back, and at one point, there'll be more people on stage that you can't even see the band.
There's so many bands in the Bay Area thrash scene and the glam metal scene that were part of the scene but still don't get a lot of mention or recognition. Like, for example, Schizo, who are still around to this day. There was the crossover, the Slambodians, and there was bands like Relic, Hellhound, Contempt, Epitaph, Turmoil, Furor, Warfare DC with future Death Angel members Will and Ted. There was Warning, there was Morticious, Militia, then Demented, Oblivion, Infernal Forces, No Logo. I mean, I could just go on. And then there's the glam metal side of the coin. I mean, there's Cherry Bay, the Aristocats, Tramp, Teaser, Erotic Doll, Tyr or TYR, Tonight You Rock from Santa Cruz. There was Kamikaze with Dick Smothers Jr., later became Electric Dick. And then there's the hard rock of bands like Ghost Town or the Alley Boys. And then also, don't forget the all-girl bands. We had Mischief and we had Mother Earth and Fantasia, who are still around to this day. I mean, it's a real shame that a lot of these bands don't get recognition that they deserve.
Early on in my career, at Uncle Charlie's, he used to hang out there and stuff, right? Just before American Idol, before all this, and he was working with Whitney Houston at the time, with Narda and all stuff. And I was on coke. I was on a lot of coke. And I had limousines and shit. And Randy saw me, you know, and one day he came to me, and he grabbed me in a headlock like this. And he said, listen, little brother, I want you to live, man. I want you to have a good career. You need to be more like Whitney and Michael Jackson. You need to act more like them, and you know what I'm saying, and get your shit together. All stuff. I'm all, okay, Randy. And she didn't see that coming.